My class is in Brewster at 2 o'clock, and we have 110 students in the class. And when I first came to ECU, it was totally up to us. The chair gives us lots of flexibility how we want to run our classroom, and you have a decision to make as an instructor. Do you want to give these students homework, or do you want to just put all the weight on the tests? Now, it's easier to just give them tests throughout the semester. Don't worry about homework. It takes your time. It's a bit of a hassle factor. So here, looking at it for this from economics, we talk about cost-benefit analysis a lot. So as an instructor, I had a cost-benefit analysis. Hey, is it worth my time and effort to have students require them to do homework? That was the question that I asked myself. And I surveyed. I wasn't the only one who's come across this question. I surveyed the largest public institutions at UNC, their intro econ classes, and asked them that very question. Are you assigning homework, or are you not bothering with homework? And happy to report 2/3 of the system, 7 largest schools are including homework in their intro econ classes, but 1/3 are not. And the reason why they're not doing, one person indicated, it takes too much of my time. So fair enough, there is a time, nothing's free, and so homework does take some of your time. So the purpose of this study then is to convince those 1/3 of those faculty who are not giving homework, hey, it's worth your time to do it. So that's kind of the nutshell where we're headed. So from the student's perspective, though, homework is costly to them. It takes their time and takes their effort, and so that's some of the cons. But from the pros, students like homework because it takes some of the weight off the test. Students say, hey, I'm not a good test taker, I got test anxiety. Well, here you can put some weight on a non-testing environment. So I gave them just a small weight, 10%. But it doesn't really matter the percent, it just matters you give them some weight is based on homework, and they seem to like that. But also from a more of a learning perspective, the benefit of assigning homework, what I've conclude, or some evidence supports this, is it more evens out their distribution flow of work. So rather than having these peaks and troughs between test and no test, test and no test, the homework makes it a little smoother because I give a series of homeworks after each chapter. They have a homework, so then they have to do a little bit of work to get that homework in. So it seems to also help with their, and I'll show you some of the results, it seems to help with their understanding too if you require homework, and I'll tell you how I came up with this, how I came up with that bullet point. But it requires more effort from their viewpoint. So that's from their student viewpoint. That's a drawback. Also requires some of their time. So here we go. So this is the homework study that I did that was recently published and I did the poster on. If you saw the poster out front. So basically, it came down to flipping a coin. You walked into my class, very first day. First, you signed an IRB. So we got permission from using human subjects and research, and I flipped a coin. And what I did was, based on your banner ID, whether the last digit was odd or even, flip a coin determined how you were graded that semester. So I had the same syllabus, and I said, okay, based on this coin flip, if it comes out a certain way heads, here's how you're going to be graded. If it comes out tails, here's how you're going to be graded based on whether your last digit is odd or even. So flip a coin, and then what happened was half the class was grouped into the treatment pool. The treatment was you had 14 homework assignments that part of your grade were determined on. The other group was the control group, no homework needed. You guys could do the homework if you want to. It's posted in Blackboard. Help yourself if you like to. You'll see what you did, but no weight of your grade will be based on the homework. So this is basically how you were grouped into the pool. The first, only one coin flip was flipped. Done flipping coins after the first day. And so students realized this, and they most students were fine with it. A couple of students said, hey, asked me about, hey, is that fair? What if I want to be in another group? I'm like, hey, it's tough luck. Drop the class. There's 12 other sections you can take. So anyway, but let me ask you, who do you think was happy after we flipped the coin? The ones don't have to do it. It was like a football game. Yes, no homework. They're all pumped up. Who do you think did better in the course? Exactly. So the ones who had the last laugh were the ones who didn't have to, the ones who did have to do the work. So here's some statistical tests from this, and this is a difference. So what we do is the first group is the treatment group, those who are required to do homework, the 14 homeworks. The control group, those who are not required to do homeworks, and it's not a huge difference. I mean, this is, oh my, I thought I had a laser pointer. But okay, so I can't click with that. But it's about two percentage points higher score on the first test. It was just outside the significant, so it was significant because it's significant than 0. Second test, it gets even larger, about 4 points higher. Third test, they dip back down, so the groups are no different. Fourth test, again, they do a little bit higher, but again, it's no different. But if you look at the overall test average, they get a little higher. So this is some evidence to show, hey, there are some effects to doing homework. You get higher test performance. There are, though, let me go to this slide, which is a little bit stronger effects. What happens if you did poorly in that first test? If you poorly defined as students who got scored under a 60 on the test. Well, so these are students who performed similarly, okay? But now we compare the treatment group who require to do homework with the control group, those who are not. What we see are larger differences. Test 2, now it's almost a 10-point difference. So you bomb the first test, okay? Well, who is going to learn the material and do better in subsequent tests? And we find those who require to do homework get about 9 points higher test 2, test 3, and end up at the end of the day with a higher test average. So they started out both doing poorly, but throughout the semester, it seems like those who are in the treatment group perform better throughout the remainder of the semester and end up with a higher test average. So quite a bit higher effects here for those underperformers, so to speak. Okay, so ECU is really concerned about student retention. This is a slide about the retention results, and I'm running low on time, so I'll okay. All right, so here's the retention results. So these were I found very interesting. So the very, very top, there are two groups of people here, the treatment group and the control group. In the treatment group, those folks who are required to do homework, those are in black. The very, very top scores are those who passed the first test and also were required to do homework. So those are your top performers. Everybody was normalized from the first test. Everybody took the first test, was in this first group. So these are the students, what proportion of them took the second test? What proportion took the third test and fourth test? So everybody took the first test, and we see those who did well in the first test and also were in the treatment group stayed in the class about 97%. So we only lost about 3% of those students who passed the first test and were required to do homework. What if you passed the first test and were not required to do homework? You're in this purple group. So the purple group, everybody took the first test, and then 10% of them dropped by that second test. Even though they passed the first test, had the higher, the Carolina blue dotted, those are the group that passed the first test, and we see second test, they're still in the class about the same rate. Third test, now 5% of them have dropped the class, and by the fourth test now about 6% of those dropped the class. So even if performing the same on the first test, the folks who are not required to do homework, the ones who are celebrating, the ones that were in that control group, they're more likely to drop the class at about twice as high a rate. Okay, now the two bottom performers, okay, the purple and the red lines, these are students who failed the first test, who made a D or worse, or F. So they all took the first test, and they all didn't do very well in this group, these two bottom groups. Who stuck around in the class? In the purple group, these are the ones who are required to do homework. So about 10% of the sample drops. So 10% of your students leave who fail the first test, who are required to do homework. But that 10%, they stay after that point. So they don't continue to drop the class because they're probably doing better on subsequent tests because they're doing their homework, hopefully learning from it. That red line are those who were celebrating, those who were not required to do homework, continued to perform poorly and drop and drop and drop throughout the semester. Look, you only end up with 1/3 of that sample is gone by the end. Whereas those who are required to do homework, here in the black and here in the purple, they are sticking in the class. So that's probably the strongest result that I find. If you want students to stay around your class to the end, require them to do homework. If you don't care if they're there or not, don't worry about assigning homework. So very strong results there for the retention. So here's some of the summaries of some of the results that I find, and I'll just kind of summarize this as follows. If you require homework, it will not move you from being a B student to being an A student. who the homework helps are the underperforming students. It can move you from a C to a B, but we don't find any higher rates of getting A's, whether you're in the homework or not required homework group. Why is this? Those kids who are overachievers, who are not required homework, are doing the homework. They're still getting the A's. Homework helps those kids who are struggling in the class. It can move them to a passing grade or move them to a B, but we find no higher rates of A's. The same amount of A's, but we do see significantly higher B's for those in the homework group. We also see higher test rates, average about 5% higher test scores as well. So this is the magic that's happening is not simply assigning homework. The magic that's happening is actually they're doing the homework. About 5% of students who are not required to do homework do it. About 75% of students who are required to do homework do every single one. So if you want them to do it, you have to require it. You can't just say, okay, it's optional. Because if it's optional, only one student at ECU out of 20 will do it. So I also talk about airline pricing in my class, and so this I'm going to just, I talk about discrimination that occurs, and I've published some work on price discrimination. This is charging different prices for the same item. And here's some of the snapshot from one of my papers on this. And here's another topic that shows the airline prices by hour, how they vary, and how this is another way airlines can maximize their profits. But I didn't have much time to talk about those findings. So excuse me for quickly flashing through there. But in summary, I enjoy teaching, and I get a lot out of it, and I'm very blessed to be here and be able to teach, and I try to get the most out of my students. And one way I get more out of my students is requiring homework. It takes more effort, not a lot of effort on the professor's part, but it does require more effort. But I find that effort is rewarded in terms of students' higher retention rates and also student higher learning rates of learning, higher test performance. So with that said, I'll go ahead and stop. And thank you very much for coming out and listening to the talk about homeworks. Thank you.
Making the A's, the students that are making the A's, would you make homework optional for them and then make it required, like almost like an incentive, you know? So, like
if you have a good student, they're a good student no matter what pool they're in, required or not required. So for those groups, they're self-motivated that homework really has, whether they're in whatever coin flip group they ended up in, they're still going to do the work, and they're still going to get the A. So what I found is this can move the marginal student into a better outcome. But if you are a good student, they're going to get good results regardless of what group you put them in.
Okay, well, he's going to fly over to his class. So,
any other questions? Yes, question.
Sorry, I have a couple of questions. First, were the groups pretty equal at the outset in terms of their
we have SAT scores, verbal and math. I mean,
Okay.
again, this is a coin flip, and they're odd or even, Banner distributed
Okay.
their scores, and so their GPAs were similar. It was, you couldn't get a more randomized set of students in terms of their academic performance before they took the class.
Good. And my second question is, for the students that were doing poorly, was there some sort of remediation offered to them, the ones that were in the study, the control group?
So the control group students, they had access to the homeworks, so they knew, and they had access to the answers, so they had it, they were treated the same. The only difference was, at the end of the day, there was zero weight assigned to how they did on their homework. So the remediation was Pirate Tutoring Center. I was available, but it was, we didn't do anything to dampen the study effects. You know, if you wanted to help, you had to come to me and ask.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your attention.
thank you very much. Our next presenter, I'm going to get out of his way, is Dr. Oliver, and he's in the program, and his presentation is on customer experience marketing. So he will set up and then we'll get going. Thank you, Jake.
No problem. So thanks for coming today. I am actually, well, let me use the clicker. Okay. Thanks for coming today. I'm going to talk about a couple different ways I have incorporated research into the classroom in a few different classes to kind of give you a taste of different ways to do it. And one, in one example, I've used research that I like, I cite a lot. In another class, I actually use to collect data to actually publish a manuscript that hopefully will be under review this summer. And then the third one is when I actually take a lot of the research that I've published myself and work it into the actual classroom material. In the first category, I talk about something in my customer relationship management class called service recovery. Service recovery is when a company makes a mistake, or we think a company makes a mistake, and we complain. And there are several important factors that can come out of this. First of all, the company can identify some critical errors in quality and policies. Chevrolet and GM are dealing with that right now, and so this could be a very serious issue. They could fix the problem if it's something minor before the customer leaves. They also have the opportunity to improve customer trust. And also, and one of the more powerful things, they can make the customer want to come back. And that's very important today because never before has a customer had more power to voice an opinion. And, the saying used to be when something good happened, you told 5 people. When something bad happened, you told 10, 15 people. Well, with Twitter, Facebook, that just doesn't work anymore. And so when companies make a mistake, they need to really go above and beyond to make that right. And so I have my next study, we'll talk a little bit more about going above and beyond. But for this assignment, I have them do something very simple. I have them write a handwritten complaint letter. Many of them look at me funny when I ask this. And how do I fold this to get it in the envelope and all that kind of stuff. But very simple. I asked them, this didn't quite translate right. Sorry about that. But I asked them what happened to upset them, make them unsatisfied. What should the company have done? What would they like the company to do to make it right? And I want them to include all the information, dates, times, specifics, receipts, so they really come across as a professional. I want them to send this letter to the highest person in the company. And students present their complaint at the beginning of the semester. I try to get this out as quickly as possible. And it's our last day of class, so we end on this, which is kind of fun. And side benefit, this gets them up in front of the class twice. So one more opportunity to work on those public speaking skills. So some results of this have a very pretty good response rate, 60 to 75%. Always higher than they think they're going to get. I always ask them to indicate how many companies will actually write back to them. At least 50% get something out of this, whether it be a coupon or an offer to call or an offer to come in and talk more about the issue. If nothing else, 90% of the students at least get an apology, an explanation, a form letter, but at least something. And an interesting part of this is some students are amazed at how far companies will go to win them back, and literally are just blown away on how the company just went above and beyond. From something as simple as movie tickets to, in this last class I had a student and her husband were really into Harley Davidsons. They had ordered some tires online. The tires were wrong, but they had already put them on the rim. The company wouldn't take them back. when she presented to the class, we said, well, why don't you mention that you're active in social media and you go on a lot of the Harley-Davidson forums and websites. The owner of the company called her personally, sent her the new tires for her and her husband, gave her a $50 gift card. And so in this world where customers have all the power, it was so great to show them what a good company will do. So the takeaway is, as I mentioned, that the power students have, but also is they learn how a good company really operates. And pretty soon they're going to be in their own careers, and they're either going to be working for a company where they can make decisions like this and do things right, or they might have their own business. And also they learn that even big corporations care. And this is being recorded. I don't want to say any names, but it rhymes with Small Mart. Now this is where I'm actually conducting a little research in the classroom. Going above and beyond customer service. And this is something where companies are trying to differentiate themselves these days and working to improve satisfaction. One of the dangers of that is something called the satisfaction trap, where a company literally becomes so obsessed with satisfaction scores that they forget that they still have to do a good job delivering the service. So that's more about getting that score. The value of employee empowerment comes up in this a lot. There are situations where employees don't have the control to sometimes really go above and beyond. They have to check with the supervisor. There's an important balance of that, going above and beyond, and also knowing why they might be doing something. If this is a new policy to try to improve customer service, it's something that the employees need to understand why they're doing it, what the rationale behind it is. And lastly is tracking what customers think about this, getting that feedback, and what they like about it, what they don't like. And this holds true also for employees. And as I say that down there at the bottom, it's hard to wow customers when you're reading from a script. And so for this one, this is where I have them submit 2 examples of excessive customer service, where basically a company is trying too hard. And I'm sure all of you have experienced this at one point or another, where someone won't stop following you around the store, or they keep making recommendations. And so the way I have the students do this is they do one themselves, and then using a snowballing technique, they go out and get another sample from a friend or a relative. A very thorough 2 to 3 page survey where they answer questions about how they feel, they describe the encounter, what was fake, what was unpleasant. And the second part is tying more back to what we've talked about in class and some of the marketing concepts, which is where are the areas for improvement, and again some of the specific marketing concepts. So some of the results for this, every student identified an interest where companies were trying to, were actually doing more harm than good by trying to go above and beyond. The most common theme was that sales associates need to listen to customer needs and wants, I can't tell you how many examples I got. I told them I wasn't interested, but they kept asking me if I wanted it. I had one student that went to a video game store, and the sales clerk followed them around, and any game that was available, the sales associate would pick up and talk about how much this person would love playing that video game. And so, at any rate, you can imagine after a handful of these, some of the students said, I won't go back to that store. And so, from a research standpoint, this looks at the marketing concept called zone of tolerance, where basically, as far as what our perceptions are of a customer service experience, we go in there, and if it falls within the zone, we really don't notice. But if it's below, it's negative, and if it's bad. If it's above, it's good, and in the marketing literature, we would call that delight. I don't really get into that too much with the students. But the idea is, when done right, delight can be a very good thing and sets your company apart. Well, these companies are, a lot of these companies that, through this study, we're not really thinking it through and doing it quite as properly as they should, and not measuring some of these initiatives. And and again, this didn't quite line up, but I'm not going to go through all these. And as a side note, if a student of mine had a slide like this, I'd tell them it was too busy. But I was real important. All of these, this gap analysis here, which is a very important part of services marketing. There are 4 provider gaps where there are sort of possibilities of failure, and almost every student example with the 2 samples mentioned all 4 of them. So providers are failing on all 4 points of trying to implement these above and beyond service strategies. So it reemphasizes the importance of employee training and feedback. And so the big picture, I don't know if you can read it down here, is companies are spending all this money on these great initiatives, not really doing it right, not empowering their employees to adapt to the sales situation, and they're driving customers away. So, okay, well, my arrows did not line up, but you'll understand what I mean. So I do teach a graduate class called Sustainability Marketing, and I've also published in the Adopting Green Products and Services, and how do you get people to buy green products that might not consider them. And the challenge with this, and all the literature in this area, says, well, this is so simple. If price and quality are equal, everyone will buy a green product. And that makes sense. We want to sleep well at night, feel good about our purchases. Well, the challenge is, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, is that that's very rarely the case where price does equal quality. In fact, sometimes the price is higher on the green product and the quality is actually lower. So recently, a lot of companies have made some innovations in this area, and they've made quality a lot higher, but they still have to charge a higher price. And so, something Patagonia would fall into that. I think Tesla might even fall into that. And so, to bring this into the classroom, well, we want to talk about, well, how can you break down some of these barriers? First one, as I just mentioned, is price. No matter all the good intentions in the world don't really help a customer get over that higher price tag unless you step in the way, educate them, and walk them through what price really means. Quality perception. Someone may have bought a green product 10, 15 years ago, and it just wasn't quite the quality that it might be today. Availability. Tesla's a good example of there. That would be something that you couldn't just walk down the street and buy. And just education, lack of information, why that type of product might be a really smart purchase decision. So what I have to do in the classroom is say, look, we can't compete on price, so forget about that. So MBA students and my master's in sustainable tourism students always look at me funny when I bring paper towels to class. But in this example, where I published a paper on product trial, we look at a green product versus a traditional paper towel. We actually have some measuring cups, and the students get to look at them, feel them, test them. We discuss how the green product is promoted. On the 7th generation green product towels, I'll talk about how it's going to save the planet and all these things. The interesting fact is there's actually twice as much in the left one, which is never pointed out in the package. Most students would say that the Bounty towels work better, which they do. But the point is that trial gives them a chance to evaluate that. The green paper towels cost more, and again, like I said, the Bounty is better. So the takeaway, though, is that the ability to touch it, feel it, really test it out definitely changes their evaluation on it and allows them to say, under certain circumstances, I would at least try that product in my own house. Something that I do in the same class, and this we really talk about when we go over price, and that is, how do you get consumers to really think about price in a way that captures everything that goes under that. And we're really talking about costs. And costs includes initial purchase price, use costs, and disposal costs. And so light bulbs are a very easy way to go through to test this. And looking at incandescent, fluorescent, and LED lights, we can really compare different options and look at that, in fact, a high purchase price still might be the best buy in the long run. And if you can look at this example here, that's one of the things I point out, that you would have to buy 25 of the old style to last as long as the one LED for $12.50. I mean, you're basically paying twice as much, and 2.5 of the fluorescent lights. But still, consumers look at that, think price is that sticker on the product. So companies need to, and these are out there, but have cost calculators, make it easy for consumers to do this. But I'd like to take it a step further, and at the bottom, how can I capture time and stress cost around this? And a light bulb's not that big of a thing, but one of the things that I do in the class, again, they look at me funny, but I come in with an extension cord and 2 night lights on each side. One has an LED light bulb, one has the traditional incandescent light bulb. And I turn them on, and before long, one of them gets really hot. You know, that's a safety issue. That never comes up in this. They get to see the different types of light, and they get to see them compared to each other. That's a good comparison. The last thing I do that is I'll usually drop it from like this high, and usually, usually the incandescent one breaks. The last time I did that, it actually broke, shattered, and luckily I have a liability part on my syllabus, so there were no concerns. But it showed the fact that there was a durability factor that we don't see, and the LED light bulb, once you climb up that step ladder to put it in the ceiling, you're done. It's going to be 20, 30 years before that goes out. And those things aren't on any of the packaging. They're not on any of the ads or things like that. That convenience. And so when you're trying to sell a product that's the most expensive product in an aisle, you got to be talking about the other stuff. And so our takeaway from that is the importance of product trial and reducing perceived risk, the best ways to convey overall cost to customers, and in that cost is not just that sticker, and identifying market opportunities, which I have a chart below, is that, and they said it in the introduction, or it's in the program, but most companies promote and market their products to the 6% of greedy consumers in the country. Those people are already on board. They're already seeking these products out. There's 34% that are never going to adopt. So why not promote some of those convenience, safety, longevity factors to that group in the middle? And that's it. Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you very much. If you have questions, his name is in the program, and give him an email.
Yep. That's good. And sorry, the formatting was all off.
I think it's how the projector does it, and how this particular one does. So
Because I promise I double-checked it.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, thank you very much. All right. Well, we're moving right along on our schedule. So if you look on the schedule for this room, the next presentation is by Dr. Yuan Ding from the College of Technology and Computer Science, and he's going to be talking about merging in a seamless blend of computer science teaching and research. And I think he's switching out computers, so it's going to take us just a minute, okay?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junhua Ding. I'm Associate Professor with Computer Science Department. And today I'm talking about a topic regarding how to integrate my research into my teaching. My teaching and research interests include certainly software engineering, particularly on software design and analysis, such as software testing, model checking. And I also doing lots of work, research work, and also software development work on data engineering, especially integration and interoperability and analytics of the biology and clinical data. I'm now working with a pretty large project with China Academy of Science to build a database. Actually, it's called big data warehouse about clinical diagnostic data. And because before I joined ECU, I had worked with Johnson & Johnson and Beckman Coulter for over than 7 years, developed IVD in vitro diagnostic devices. And I'm still working with some professor in medical school and physics department to develop the next generation of flow cytometry system. And my teaching philosophers includes that keep the knowledge up to date. We are a computer science professor and also a software engineering professor. This field are growing very fast, and we have to keep the pace with the current knowledge and the technology. And we focus on teaching the problem solving and creative thinking, because I believe that's even more important than just teaching the textbook content. The way we're doing is certainly is provide the project and for a real project for students to practice. And we encourage collaborative learning, and because software engineering is teamwork. And fortunately, I received some small grant from ECU to help a student to work together after classroom to build a real software system. And also, we need to understand the different needs from students, because some of our graduate students, they may want to go to the graduate school again to get a PhD degree. Some students probably they want to find a job in the industry. So I try my best to help the student to how to maximize their time and effort. And also, we need to integrate the theory and practice. For myself, my research actually originally more focused on the theoretical, especially for method this part. I still believe theoretical stuff are very important, and that's the foundation to build a high-quality software system. But for our students, we also need them to understand the practice and be skilled on developing software system, because that's also a motivation to study theory. How to integrate research with teaching? I teach lots of different courses from 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, and 6,000, and cover almost every area of software engineering and computer science. And for the undergraduate programming course, that's very tough to teach, and normally the fail rate is very high. The very important idea is to teach a student how to start, how to thinking about the problem solving, not just teaching them syntax and to tell them, okay, to emulate some program. So I try my best to integrate a little bit about software testing into the undergraduate programming courses. Although lots of research claim that way is very effective, but unfortunately, based on my experience, probably not so easy. Because understand software testing sometimes even more difficult to understand the program itself. So for myself, I only created some a little bit tools and with some guideline to help a student to even don't understand the testing, but they can guide the student to program. And bring the research frontier topic into the graduate course teaching. For our graduate, lots of students are interested in such as social media, cloud computing, mobility, this type of big data, this type of stuff. So in my course, because most courses I taught have to include some term projects, so I include in this type of interesting term project or module into the course teaching. Integrate interdiscipline research into computer science teaching because I work together with several professors in medical school and physics department. So I have that opportunity to design some software development project to solve or help other discipline areas, such as we have some project to do the 3D reconstruction of cell images, and we also have some like project to do some Monte Carlo simulation, this type of stuff. And encourage students to be my research collaborate. Actually, I published more than 8 papers with students. All of them are peer-reviewed. And so every semester, I have probably always of them 10 graduates still work with me, and I also supervise several undergraduates. Some of them actually already got the research and creative grant from ECU, and several of them went to very nice graduate school. So how to mentoring students in research? First, certainly, we need to guide students to build a solid research foundation. This probably we need spend a lot of time to help them to do the survey, to practice some foundation concept and principle. Help students to choose the right research project. This probably is the most difficult part because student interests are so broad. And sometimes as a professor, you actually not really know everything, okay? It looks like you know everything, but unfortunately, most time you may not know more than a student, especially for computer science or some engineering stuff. So I spend a lot of time trying to catch up with students and help them to design a reasonable project. Offer student opportunity to collaborate with others. We have some social networks, especially LinkedIn. I always use LinkedIn to keep track with my students. And we also have some Facebook content, but unfortunately Facebook, nowadays, lots of students actually don't like it because they probably have too much information and they don't want to share with faculty. Suppose students to apply research result into the practice, because a lot of my project actually work with medical school and physics department. So some of my projects actually pretty useful. And encourage students to get support from research grant. This is very important, and sometimes the money will help to motivate students. So fortunately, I got several grants from ECU, including teaching grant, BB&T leadership grant. I also received some SF grant to support students to do some research, and we still have several grants on the pipeline. So the research, so last year I received the SF, the IU grant. This is the first IU award to ECU. I'm not sure this is the first IU, but it should be a first IU site. IU have 2 different types. One is IU site, that is the grant only for build IU. Another is IU supplementary, that if you have research grant, you can extend with IU to help undergraduate student to do some research. Fortunately, we received this grant, and last year we recruit 10 undergraduate students nationwide, and these students work together with our faculty mentor, and we are doing an excellent job, and we are continue to do this this year. Fortunately, we have new faculty will join this team. That would be great. So some sample project I already worked with my students, such as some quality assurance algorithm for immunohematology analysis. This algorithm actually I borrowed from a real project where I, as a project manager, worked with Johnson & Johnson, and the algorithm used to manage the whole blood bank in French blood bank. And modeling and analysis social networks, we actually, our student and I published a couple of papers on this topic. And Monte Carlo simulation for media mix modeling, I believe the marketing professor probably know this better than me. And the data analysis and management of flow cytometry data and 3D reconstruction of cell image, this type of stuff, we published a couple of papers as well. And our student built a very good software system to do these confocal images. Aspect-oriented software design and testing, and we also published a nice paper in a pretty good research conference with my student, metamorphic software testing, modeling and analysis of security, like access control, and also now focus on now is data integration, interoperability, and analytics of the biological and clinical data. That's my current most focus. Thank you very much.
Oh.
What is interoperability?
Interoperability means we need to exchange data, such as if we have the CT data, at the same time we have IVD data. The data actually are very different. So how we can actually, but they actually may mean some represent same stuff. So we need to have some facility to help to understand each other. So we have a view to look at even the data source different, okay, but the computer still can understand all of them.
With respect to the modeling and analysis of social networks, what kind of modeling were you doing, and how did the student get involved with you in doing that?
This project we actually use this social network. Actually, suddenly we use a Petrolet. That's my research topic. We use a Petrolet to modeling it and analyze. We try to use that time the published paper is using the model checking to check this some reachability or this type of things.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next professor is from the College of Education, Dr. Schmidt. And are you okay, or what do you need to do?
Yep.
We'll let him adjust the computer.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. It's nice to see so many familiar faces out here. My name is Steve Schmidt, and I'm the College of Education. Adult Education is my program. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is a study that I worked on with several colleagues called Professors as Students, How Faculty Learn to Teach Online. Now, you know that expression, you can tell a professor, but you can't tell them much? Well, it turns out it's not true. You can actually tell them something occasionally. And we found that in our study, and we're going to go through that in a second. Just a little background on our study. First of all, everybody here, I'm sure, knows about the growth of online education. The American Society for Training and Development in 2012 found that 33% of formal learning hours are spent using some form of technological delivery. And that's in 2012. And so that number has no doubt increased in the meantime. And we're seeing online education growing in courses, individual courses, and in degree programs altogether. So it's growing in a lot of ways in the field of education. As it grows, and as more and more instructors get involved in online teaching and learning, they're finding that there are some changes because the roles of the instructor are different in face-to-face and online learning. And because of that, instructors have a lot of concerns about online education. Some of the differences are noted here on this slide, but there are big changes to the roles and responsibilities of those who teach online. Those who teach in traditionally face-to-face environments typically can deliver a lecture in front of a group of people, lecture and the students listen and take notes. That's a traditional type of format. Well, in the online classroom, you obviously can't do that because people are scattered all over. So the role of the instructor changes from a lecturer to more of a facilitator, where the instructor works with individual students or small groups of students. The role changes from that of a presenter to more of a guide or a coach. Again, somebody that helps students and facilitates learning on a smaller level than just lecturing in front of everybody. Get this out of here. Also, instructors in traditional face-to-face classes may not need to know as much about instructional design, but instructors who work online have to have instructional design skills because they have to be able to put materials on their websites. They have to put materials online so their students can access them and work on them as part of classroom activities. Technology is a whole different thing. Instructors in the past, in face-to-face classes, didn't need to know a lot about technology or needed to know enough to get a projector going and a computer going like this. But instructors teaching online, technology all of a sudden becomes very important, and that knowledge becomes very important. The relationships with students are a bit different. When we look at the traditional instructor-student relationship, there's a bit of a distance. You know, the instructor, again, is up on a podium talking to students who are in desks in a classroom. So there's some space between that. Whereas in the online learning environment, the instructor works more closely with the student. You know, in some of these examples, we talk about that transition of roles for professors as going from the stage on the sage to a guide on the side. And you hear that term used fairly often when we look at differences between teaching face-to-face and online. So these are just a few examples of some of the differences. Now, what happens is what an important thing to consider is many of us, and research shows this, many of us teach the way we were taught. And we design our courses based on how we had courses delivered to us as students. It's social learning theory. You know, we learn from watching and modeling the behavior of other people. And so this is how many instructors have typically learned to teach. They teach the way they were taught in their own courses. And we organize our traditional face-to-face courses based on how our courses as students were organized for us. But online learning is different because many people who are instructors now and who are going to be teaching or who are teaching online classes have never been students in the online class. So there's not that guide that they have. There's not that model that they have to go on when they go forward to try to teach online. So we have instructors who are asked to teach online. They don't really have any guide or model to go on. They find that technology skills are important. They find that instructional design skills are important. They're not exactly sure about their roles. And with the growth of distance education going so quickly, the clock is ticking on all of this. All this is happening very quickly. So it's understandable that instructors feel a lot of pressure because there's a lot to learn in a very short amount of time because every day more and more classes and more degree programs are going online. So the purpose of our study, we looked at how instructors learn to teach online. We looked at what online instructors learned about online teaching and how what they learned has shaped their practice. And we looked at what are the characteristics of ideal online instructors as told to us by this group. It was a qualitative study, a series of focus groups of online instructors. Now, in order to be in the focus group, you had to have had some experience teaching face-to-face and online. We had people in the focus groups with a variety of levels of experience teaching online, and we had them from a variety of subject areas. So they taught a variety of different subject matters. And the data that we gathered were transcriptions and notes from participants and notes from the researchers and facilitators as well. So some of the things that we found. When told they would be teaching online, there was an initial feeling of panic. There was worry, apprehension, unpreparedness, overwhelmedness. We found that many times people learned that they were teaching online in very short or very quick types of situations where a lot of people's reactions were, I knew I'd be teaching online sometime, but then somebody left and I found out 2 weeks before the class started I had to teach online. or somebody changed a course around or a schedule around, and so I had to teach online and I had to do it now. So we found that many times that's how people are introduced to online teaching is, we need you to teach this course starting next week. So understandably, there were a lot of feelings of worry and apprehension and unpreparedness and overwhelmedness. And the first thought was, how do I transfer what I do face-to-face to online? There was a lot of talk about how to transfer, as if, in people's minds they think, well, I do this lecture face-to-face, how can I put this lecture online? It wasn't a case of, I do this lecture face-to-face and this is what the students get out of it. How can the students get the same thing online? What do I have to do in order to make the learning experience the same? It's how can I move this over here? And so that was the initial way a lot of people approached online teaching, until they realized a lot of times there was no good way of doing that. And so gradually they seemed to figure out ways to move content online and to put things online without just replicating what they did in the face-to-face classroom. There was also a sense of role ambiguity and confusion. What does it mean to teach online? That we have these perceptions of teachers as being the people up on the dais is talking to us. But again, the role of the teacher is different online, and the teacher works more closely with the student. And so there was a little bit of role ambiguity and confusion. And that was, I think, added to that. There's this whole issue that online learning is more convenient. So you had these students or these instructors that were struggling with what is my role here, and they're struggling with how to teach online. At the same time, getting messages from the university and saying, enroll in online courses. You can do them in your pajamas. It's easy. You can do them anytime you want to, anytime, any place. So these teachers are struggling, with this very difficult thing, being surrounded by messages that talk about how easy it is and how convenient it is. So there was a little bit of confusion there in the messages that instructors got. For some, there was a struggle to master technology that was associated with online learning environments. And so for some, and this depended more on the individual. For some, it was more difficult than others. What we found overwhelmingly was that the motivation to succeed was the desire to make sure that the student had a good learning experience. And that was really the key in what kept people going. People said, I didn't, looking back, people said, these classes were terrible, the ones that I did at first, but, I knew the students deserved better, and I wanted to give them more, and I wanted to make it a good experience for them. So that we found was really the motivation to succeed. So we found that with regard to learning to teach online, it was a pretty haphazard process, and it often happened in little pieces or chunks. People tended to develop informal learning, mostly informal learning. People developed key contacts here and there, and everybody seemed to have their own network of key contacts. Somebody could tell them about this thing, someone who could help them with technology, someone who could help them with their subject matter. And so everybody seemed to have developed their own methods, and all of them were effective, but each one was different, and each one had different contacts and knew somebody, and the way they learned was sometimes comparing notes. Oh, do you know who can do this? Oh, yeah, I know someone who can do that. I can hook you up with that person. Support from colleagues was really critical, and a lot of learning to teach online was trial and error. People tried things and just didn't work, and then they tried something else next time. One thing that came out of the focus groups was the formal training was not as helpful as people had hoped, mainly because formal training tended to focus more on technology and less on teaching. And a lot of the comments were, I wanted to learn how to teach online. And while the technology piece was helpful, it didn't really teach me how to teach online. So we found that was interesting, that the training mostly focused on technology was not as helpful as it might have been. As instructors matured, and you could see the responses to these questions kind of change course when we started talking about the maturity of the online instructor. When instructors matured, they tended to have more tools in their toolbox. So they could use multiple methods and multiple strategies to work with individual students. There was more focus on the individual student in the class. And maybe this student or this group of students needed something and this other group needed something else. There was also more focus on student learning styles, improved communication and multiple communication methods. More focus on creativity, trying other things, different technology programs that might allow for video or might allow for different things in the classes, and more confidence overall. When asked about the ideal qualifications or qualities of ideal online instructors, everybody said that content knowledge was critical, and that was really the big thing that came out of it. Technological knowledge is important too, even though the group thought technological knowledge tended to overshadow content knowledge in some ways when we look at important characteristics for online instructors. Being responsive is important, responsive to students, and understanding that students are in the classes all the time. And so responsiveness means, the class is never over. And so the last little button there, the time commitment, is great. It's great because responsiveness is important. And when online classes are going, people are on them day and night. That's one of the positives about online classes, is you can do them anytime. For instructors, though, it becomes questions of time management. So implications for this study. We hope that this study helps us to understand these experiences in order to better prepare future online educators and possibly help us to develop roadmaps for how to teach future online educators, what to do as well as what not to do. I said we a couple times during this process because I worked on, we have a College of Education distance ed community of practice, and two of my colleagues, Elizabeth Hodge, who's right here, and Christina Cheetah, who I don't see here today, but the three of us worked on this study, so I wanted to give them a special thanks. And that's all. Any questions or comments? Yes, Vivian.
Steve, thank you for the information. Can you talk a little bit more about the depth of engagement, the length of time for the focus groups? Like, did you engage them multiple times? How exactly did the focus groups work, and for how long, that sort of thing?
We had 3 focus groups. Each of them lasted an hour. Elizabeth, is that right? 3 focus groups, each lasted an hour, hour and a half long, 90 minutes long. And in each focus group, we had about 5 or 6 people. And we specifically asked people of different lengths of tenure and different experiences and things like that, and, both teaching and online teaching.
So, I'm sorry, follow-up. How did you gauge then their maturation in the process? One of your slides had to do with as they matured. Mm-hmm. So how did you get out at that? We purposely wanted to look at growth and development. So we started out by talking about initial experiences, and then our questions got more toward where are you now and what's the difference. Now, when we got to those questions, some of the people who were more novice teachers just didn't participate because they were newer. But those questions were answered more by those who had more experience. Okay. Yes, John.
You talked about on your slides technology in general. Did you drill down to any specifics like types of technology that were frustrating and which ones worked better? And also, part of that is when I work in my classes, the hardest thing for me to do is to recreate a class discussion that I know I can do more richly in a face-to-face class. And I want to create that, and I'm not finding the technology that really does it that well, Mm-hmm. And that makes it harder for me to want to teach online, although I do, and I find ways to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. In answer to your first question, we didn't drill down that far at this point. But one of the things we've done subsequently is a community of practice group that did drill down into technology issues and looked at specific technologies and how they might be used in different situations. So that was a future study that kind of was based a bit on this, but we're not at the point where we're still gathering information on that.
Steve, when I started teaching online in the late 1990s, the expectation or hope seemed to be that there would be content specialists and technology specialists kind of right beside you, and that the content people wouldn't really have to learn that much about the technology and the instructional design either, because these other people would be doing that. And I don't think that's happened a lot in my life. What do you think that that model was not the right one, or is it just a matter of not having enough resources for that many people? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It seemed to me that the people who were most successful as online instructors had both. And so I don't know that model where you had two experts each in an area. One of the things that when we looked at different ways of different professional development opportunities and things like that, and different ways people learn to teach online, one of the things that came out was the formal training sessions were more helpful when there were colleagues all of the same discipline in them. And that's because you could talk a bit more about, in your own language. And so I think that sort of thing is helpful, and that's why I think, we as online instructors have to have both, because you might have somebody who knows a lot about technology, but the application of that in a situation where you need it, that may be where the gap is. So, yes, a lot of.
I don't know if you guys had a chance in this phase of the research to get, Dorothy, thanks, to get to this aspect, but did you get any sense of what people were teaching and what the outcomes needed to be, how that might have had an impact? So if I'm teaching something that's more didactic versus an advanced teacher education course, or even an intern seminar, or like the library science.
Yeah, no, we didn't get
Okay.
into a specific subject area. We just looked at it in general. Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I had Steve when I was in the doctoral program here before I started teaching at ECU. And when you talked about a model, I think that's so important. He was an excellent model for me. I mean, I came to ECU teaching and ready to hit the floor running because of having Steve for an adult ed class I took as part of my doctoral
Thank you.
training.
That's nice of you to
So
say.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to jump ahead of you, Dot, because Pam Reese was one of my students, and I knew her as an outstanding student, but now we all know her as an outstanding scholar teacher. So it's great. It's great that we could present together. I just also wanted to say, because I don't get a chance to say thank you formally to a lot of people, but I want to acknowledge my dad is here, and my mom I know is here in spirit, and really when I think I started learning to teach from their examples. I remember when I was young, my dad would cut newspapers out. He taught at the community college. He'd cut newspaper clippings out and take them into school every day to share with his classes. And we would drive to school with my mom every morning because she taught at my school district. And she'd like to be the first one there every day. And, so we got awful early because she'd like to be there early. And Dad always said, your mother thinks they can't run the school without her. So we, climb in the car and get there early. And so I think that's really where I got my love of teaching. And I appreciate them for instilling that in me, because I'm really lucky that I get to do this, and I'm lucky I get to work with such wonderful people, and I have a wonderfully supportive partner, and so thank you so much for letting me do what I get to do.
Thank you so much. And our last speaker today has already been actively involved in the afternoon's program is Dr. Pamela Reese from the College of Nursing, and she's going to be speaking, as your program says, on the virtual community clinic learning experience, a web-based approach to interprofessional education. While she's setting up, I'd like to put in a little promo, if I may. We were just talking about our Dr. Schmidt was talking about teaching online. Next week is the UNC System DE Week, and so there are a lot of programs that are being presented online, virtually, and we have several of those coming out of ECU. And also there are other programs from our sister institutions. So if you get a chance, please go online and view those. Also next week
is the Sloan C Conference, which is on using technology in teaching. And ITCS has purchased a license, and so there are some licenses where you can actually sit at your desk and view, but we're also providing some of those sessions together. So do look at the OFE mailing that went out, or go look at our site, because that's important. And I'm hoping that Scott's going to be on that next week too. They're still trying to get their session together. I think, well, you're not trying to get it together. UNC Systems trying to get it together, but I think that's done. So I'm sorry to take, but now for our last presenter today, Dr. Reese.
Thank you all for hanging in there with me to the bitter end on this beautiful day. I'm going to be presenting one objective of our three-objective program that is funded through HRSA at the College of Nursing. And the first piece, the first objective, is the virtual community clinic learning environment, a web-based approach to interprofessional education. So what is interprofessional education? Unless you've lived in Antarctica or somewhere in the jungle without any kind of communication at all, we've all had emails and other communications about interprofessional education. There are several definitions floating around as to what interprofessional education, and I'm going to call it IPE from now on because that's a hard word to say, hard couple of words to say. But the one that most scholars and providers use is the one that the World Health Organization came out with in 2010, and that is that interprofessional education occurs when students from two or more professions learn about, with, and from each other in order to enable effective collaboration and to improve health outcomes. So why interprofessional education and why now? Well, we all know that there's been a push to deliver health care in a more efficient and effective and cost-effective manner, and that certainly patient safety and quality should be a part of that equation as well. However, in the health sciences and in the healthcare professions, we've been educated really in silos. Nurses go through nurses training with other nurses and are socialized in the nursing role, and the same thing for medicine and other roles, dentistry and other allied health roles as well. Even though we know that research has shown for the last 50 years that patient outcomes are definitely improved when you have a collaborative team-based approach, there's still the tendency to educate all of us in silos. And I really like what nurse educator Diane Angelini said about silos, and that is that silos foster power, competition, and hierarchy, and certainly not teamwork and collaboration. With the Affordable Care Act here, of course, we are tasked even more to deliver effective and efficient health care, and the only way to do that is in healthcare teams. So interprofessional education, while it sounds like a good idea on paper, it's really very complicated and very challenging. In addition to the role socialization and the professional culture that exists in the health sciences, there's the faculty have to deal with their attitudes about IPE. A lot of us were not trained in an interprofessional manner, and so we're a little bit uncomfortable with IPE because we don't really know the basic concepts of IPE. And we may have some misgivings and some misunderstandings about what IPE is all about. There's always going to be a different number of students in the health professions. For example, in our project, the last time around, we had 6 midwifery students and 13 medical students in our cohort. And so the numbers are not always going to be equal for a one-on-one experience. We're geographically isolated from each other, particularly in our program where our students attend online. Ours is a distance ed program, and the med students, of course, attend face-to-face. We have differences in our curricula and also in our accreditation requirements. And also, interprofessional education is expensive. Who's going to pick up the tab? Is it going to be nursing, medicine? These are all considerations when implementing an IPE initiative. And it always causes more work for the faculty. It increases our already heavy workload. So the name of our project, the name of the grant, is Enhancing the Care of Women Throughout the Lifespan Using Virtual Technology in Interprofessional Education. And we used a web-based technology that was created here by our IT staff at the College of Nursing through a HRSA grant that they had for the nurse practitioner concentration. And I'm going to give you a demo of that. I'm going to try to rush through so we'll have time to give you a little demo of the virtual clinic. But in our project, we developed cases in GYN, women's gynecology, antepartum, intrapartum, and postpartum care. And this last time around, we've had the students build the cases. I built the case up to a certain point, and then the students took over after that. They created the labs that they should have gotten for the patient, the differential diagnoses, what the actual diagnoses was, and the plan. So it was a really good experience for midwifery and medical students to come together and collaborate on the care of this virtual patient. I've created several online modules that deal particularly with IPE content and the core competencies, which I'll talk about in a minute. And those are delivered through Blackboard. Students participate in a discussion board on Blackboard. And they also were given the option to contribute to a blog that I have about this project, and it's open access for everyone. The two project objectives regarding this sub-objective of the project is to evaluate the clinical and interprofessional competencies in the nurse midwifery and third-year medical students using the virtual clinic case-based scenarios. And also I'm examining the attitudes of the midwifery and the third-year medical students toward interprofessional education and interprofessional teams. So in 2011, the IPEC, which is the Interprofessional Education Collaborative, is made up of several stakeholders in the health sciences, came together and tried to decide, well, what do we think are the core competencies that we should be teaching students about interprofessional practice? And they determined that values and ethics, roles and responsibilities, interprofessional communication, and teams and teamwork were four of the domains in which several sub-objectives fall. But these are the things that we should be teaching students in terms of interprofessional collaboration. Before developing the modules and the content for this activity between the midwifery and the medical students, I went through and mapped the curriculum of both sets of learners just to show the students that even though this student is a medical student and this student is a nurse midwifery student, the content is very similar, what we're learning in terms of caring for the well woman. Now, obviously, physicians care for sick women, and a midwife would refer a patient to a physician if the woman had a medical complication. But generally, for the healthy woman, we're actually doing a lot of the same things. So this is just a little snippet from the concept map, and you probably can't see it too well, but on the left-hand side here are the medical student objectives, and on the right side are the American College of Nurse Midwife core competencies for basic midwifery practice. And this was preventive care. This one is related to preventive care. And so the midwifery core competencies are a little bit more detailed in what we provide for preventive care, but as you can see, the med students certainly have an objective in there on preventive care for the well woman. And concept mapping was developed here through one of my nurse midwife colleagues who works for Brody School of Medicine. She helped me with some of this concept mapping. That's Jan Sahlstrom, and I'd like to recognize her for her contribution. So each module contains like a map of just a general overview of the unit activities. And this is a map that we used in this last module. The cases were built around a medical condition called menorrhagia, which is heavy uterine bleeding. And the students were presented with 3 different virtual cases for this particular problem, because this can happen in women all throughout the lifespan. They were presented with an adolescent case, a woman of childbearing age, and a menopausal woman. And they had to figure out what lab tests they were going to order on each of these virtual patients, and they worked in groups, midwifery and medical students. Then they had to come up with the differential diagnoses, which is a list of all the possible diagnoses based on the information they received, and then the actual diagnoses after they've narrowed it down, and then come up with a plan for management. So I did give all students there's pre and post surveys measuring attitudes toward interprofessional education and attitudes toward team-based care. So they fill them out before the activity, then they complete the activity, which consists of the virtual clinic patients and the Blackboard activities. And then at the end, they complete post-activity surveys, measuring their attitudes still, and then also just measuring what they thought of the group dynamic, the group process, as well as any feedback about the virtual clinic itself. Okay, now I'm going to take you to the virtual clinic, I hope. To show you, and the virtual clinic actually has two sides. What you're going to see now is what we call the front end, or the animation side. The back end is the programming side, and I do want to recognize our IT folks, Carl Fazier, who is our IT director, Yanhao Zhu, who developed the programming or the back side of the virtual clinic, and Quan Chen, who does the animation. We realize, I see Dr. Ding is not in the room anymore, but we realize that this looks nothing like Second Life. You know, our avatars are not at the point of being that sophisticated, but this whole program was not created with that intent. It was created to help students work through a diagnostic sequence and to come up with the right determination at the end of that sequence. So we're going to take case number 138 now, which is an adolescent. You do have to install Unity Web Player to see this, which just takes a few seconds to do. So it's that easy now. They're ready to go on in and take the case. Is there any sound? Okay. One thing about the virtual clinic is there's a text-to-speech engine in the clinic. So whatever we type in the text on the back end, the avatar will speak at the front end. And there's the ability to program multiple languages in this text-to-speech engine too.
Yep. No sound.
Okay, good. And so we're going to, over the summer, we're going to do some antepartum cases where the avatar is speaking Spanish. And also we'll be translating it to English for the students too. Oops. So when the student is presented to the virtual clinic, they see this window here. Let me try to use this. And when they click on the start, they'll hear their name.
Hello, Pamela. It's nice to see you at the virtual clinic today. Please continue down the hall to the computer where you can research your patients for today. Please read their registration and health history forms, and when ready, proceed to the examination room and begin your patient interview.
Okay, and I know this avatar sounds a little robotic, but but you know, we're on a budget here. We're working with what we have. We did have a wonderful contract with a vendor from Germany, and it fell through at the last minute, but he was going to create really amazing 3D avatars for us, consistent with what the military uses, but that fell through, and we had to rely on our in-house staff and students, and still they've done an amazing job. I'm not going to get the chance to show you our birthing room today, but they created a wonderful birthing room for us where the avatar can sit on a birthing ball, she can sit in the water during labor and take a bath, and they've done amazing work with what they've had to work with. So the student will move to the next section, which gives just the...
Today you will be caring for Jasmine Hernandez, a 14-year-old Hispanic patient who presents with heavy menstrual bleeding.
So it's important a lot of times to read here what the avatar says, because the words may not be exactly as they should come out. And they zoom down the hall to get just some basic demographics and the vital signs. Okay, and this is the part where the students are challenged. They have to choose the right questions to come up with the right conclusion so that they can form the proper diagnosis and plan. So they would ask this patient about her chief complaint and just some other questions that you would ask a normal patient when she was coming in to see you.
Yes. It started 2 days ago.
And have you?
No.
And some of these questions have absolutely nothing to do with why she's there today, but that's the whole point. If they ask that question, as you'll see as we move to the next section, they'll get feedback at each juncture as to how they did. So they got several questions. As a student, I got several questions right, but yet I missed several questions too. And so I'm going to continue on to the next section. And I'm going to go through this really quickly because we're about out of time.
I've only had 3 periods. They came every 2 to 4 months. No.
Okay. And it's the same thing for each section. The ones that they answered incorrectly will show up in red. And
no.
And same thing here. And we provide feedback as to why their answer is right or why it's wrong. And the students this time had to do it too. So this is where the learning comes in, is they have to come up with a rationale for why they chose the lab test that they did, and what information it's going to give them that will help them to build their diagnosis and plan. So then just continuing on here. And so as students, when you're a student, you want to order a whole host of lab tests that would probably cost this patient about $3,000. We are building a billing and coding feature into the virtual clinic that will let the students know the financial implication of their choices. So, obviously they're not going to want to choose an MRI for a patient if an MRI is not really indicated. That's going to be way too expensive. And they can get the same information from less invasive or less costly ways too, particularly for patients that are uninsured, which we still will have in spite of the Affordable Care Act. And then they have to choose what all possibly could be wrong with this patient based on their diagnoses, the information they've gotten so far. And again, this case was created, the last few sections were created by the students, so they put in far more diagnoses than we probably would as instructors. And then 2 diagnoses, and both of these are correct based on the information that was given. And so they continue to the next step. Now that they've had the diagnosis, they have to choose from all these choices what would be the correct plan for this patient. And then on the next screen, they're given their feedback as to why it's right or why it's wrong. And then skipping on to the last step.
Thank you for completing this case. I hope this has been a good learning experience.
So they get a grade based on their answers, whether they were right or wrong, and the grade appears at the end. And then up at the top of the screen, they click on this little blue spot up here, and they write a SOAP note. A SOAP note is a note like you would write in a patient's chart, outlining, just summarizing that encounter. They do still have access to the health history and to the patient's vital signs. And as I mentioned, what you're seeing is just the front end or the animated side. There's a whole back end that I'm not going to have time to get to today. Let's see. So, and this is my first Prezi presentation, so I'm learning. Thankfully, I have a wonderful assistant that put it together for me. I tried and got frustrated, so she finished it up for me. But using technology and online education for interprofessional education certainly has its benefits and its barriers. The benefits include that this allows students to meet with different schedules. As Steve said, they can meet in their pajamas or work from home asynchronously. We don't have to, beat ourselves up about how to get them together face to face, because that's really impossible with our schedules to accomplish that. You can use this technology anywhere. You can be overseas and use it. One day we hope to offer this to a global community and offer students the opportunity to collaborate with students from other countries. The content can be reused over time, which is nice. These cases are saved, so you can use them over and over again, just updating the content as needed as the clinical recommendations change. And it allows students to practice critical reasoning in a safe environment. They can choose, for example, all the answers and learn from that too. Generally, we give them 2 times to run through it, so theoretically they can go through it the first time and choose everything so that they get to see the right and wrong answers, and then run through it the second time and get 100. But that's okay. We're not here to grade them on this technology. We're here for that. We want them to learn from this experience. The barriers are that this technology, of course, is very costly. We were grateful to have 2 HRSA grants to help fund this technology. It's a long developmental trajectory. It took us about a year to get to the point where we are here for our grant. Technical failures are, of course, always a possibility. It's really hard to build new content into curricula that are already full with uniprofessional content. There's a steep learning curve for both faculty and students when you're using new technologies. The faculty workload, of course, as I mentioned, is increased. And even though this may seem like a good idea, we really don't have any longitudinal outcomes yet to know if this is really going to benefit students in the long run. I am working with some colleagues in Canada on a paper where we looked at internet-based technologies in student learning and IPE and a review of the literature, so we hope to get that published by the summer. And so what's on the horizon for us? This project has kind of taken on a life of its own. We are collaborating with the nurse practitioner faculty, in addition with the Brody School of Medicine faculty. I have put a proposal in for an elective for a med student, a 4th-year med student elective that went to the curriculum committee this week, and so hopefully that'll be offered to the med students in the fall. The nurse practitioner students are doing some exciting things with their grant. Part of their focus is going to be on agro-medicine, so they're going to be building virtual clinic cases that deal with agro-medicine, which is really going to be exciting because that's certainly an underserved population in our region. As I mentioned, we're going to have the Spanish-speaking avatars make their debut in 2004. And really, there's no limitations. The opportunities are just limitless for using this type of technology in student learning. And of course, I do want to acknowledge HRSA for supporting us financially for this grant, and also, again, for our IT in-house staff for supporting us as well. And so, thank you. Hi. Yeah, it won't. You can't hear me.
I think this idea is great, especially being in clinical practice and seeing that there's a push, nationally and internationally to get folks to, improve interprofessional collaboration and communication. And I feel like there's a lot of unlearning that has to happen. So for teaching students from the get-go, I think that this is really a great model. And I was curious how the students perceive this experience, because you had said there were evaluations that they...
Yeah, I'm still collecting data. This activity just ended on Friday, so my evaluations are trickling in, so I don't have all the evaluations to tell you what the conclusion of this is. But just from what the students turned into me, I really think that they're going to think that this was a good learning experience. Of course, as students work in groups, there's always going to be some complaint that, some people are doing more than others, which is to be expected. I've already heard those type of complaints. But I've done 2 other iterations of this project using different methodologies, and I think this one is going to be the best one, having the students work together to finish creating these cases. And I will be hopefully implementing a course next year where I'm going to open it up to East Campus students as well as all students in the Health Sciences Division to work collaboratively to develop all sorts of interprofessional cases.
Great.
Thank you. And I do want to say one more thing. I want to give one more shout out to Dr. Connie DeWeese, who's sitting right here. She's the lead faculty for one other important initiative on this project, and it's what we call the Mini Business Institute, which is we've extended to family medicine and OB/GYN residents, and we have a colleague in the medical schools who's also interested in collaborating with us on this project. Dr. DeWeese is collaborating with Dr. Bill McDowell in the College of Business, and it's really been a wonderful endeavor. Dr. DeWeese has co-authored an article about it that's going to be published in the Journal of Midwifery and Women's Health soon. And also she's presenting at our annual conference about this project with Dr. Elizabeth Jesse and with Dr. Bill McDowell. So we're really excited that we're getting the word out and that people are going to know that ECU is just a wonderful place, as we all know.
Well, then, thank you very much. This concludes our symposium today, and thank you all for participating in it and for your thoughtful questions, and to our scholar teachers for their wonderful work that they're doing and for their willingness to share it. So have a great, looks like we actually have spring, at least for another day. So have a great spring and come again next year.